Hello, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. So are you ready for a great story tonight? Because I've got one for you. So let's get started, shall we? Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, she walks quickly, her eyes wide, her lips locked, her blonde hair bouncing buoyantly on her shoulders as she moves swiftly down the sidewalk. The clip-clop sound of her corked-heeled sandals batter the pavement with a fast knocking pace that increases in intensity as she speedily moves forward. With a steady gait, she clutches her purse tightly to her side, almost as if she's half expecting someone dangerous to pounce out of the looming shadows, to jump out on her unaware, to snatch her prized possession away from her that contains her money and all her credit cards. This is a small North American town, where crime does not usually have the audacious audacity to puncture its talons in this side of the world. And when it does, it happens so fleetingly that the residents are quick to overlook such minuscule offences, as they are few and far between. Perhaps it is the cast-iron city girl in her that makes this woman more reticent to trust. And yet what she's doing tonight is possibly one of the most courageous things she's ever done before. Foolish maybe, but courageous most certainly. She's determined to go through with it. This is the ultimate way to extract her revenge on the man who's been fooling around on her for goodness knows how long. Sometimes a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. And Marilyn may be many things, but she's no pushover. The night is tenebrous, with a slight edginess to it, that leaves Marilyn slightly unsettled. The moonlight is minuscule, but the rounded luminescent bulbs perched on top of the tall street lamps, and the lights from the shops, boutiques, and restaurants in the town inject the night with a cheerful kaleidoscope of bright colours, so that her pathway is visibly clear. The young woman physically shudders as she recollects the haunting memory of seeing the photographs of her boyfriend locked in the arms of another woman. And boy, did it sting. So this is what it felt like to be cheated on. She'd always wondered about that. She'd never experienced hurt like this before, and hoped to never again. Of course she had known of friends who'd been in relationships where infidelity was involved. But boy, it was a whole different ballgame when it actually happened to you. It was viciously cruel. It was like being in a buoyant gas balloon one minute that is ruthlessly deflated the next. So it pops, explodes, and the gas dwindles away into the ether until it is no more. Just a brief, colourful impression that graces the sky for a second and is long forgotten. It would seem her boyfriend had been like an empty earthenware jug that she mistakenly thought was full to overflowing, harbouring a precious priceless oil that she would always treasure and cherish most greatly. But all the time, there was nothing in there at all. She had studied the cell phone photographs intently, taken by her well-meaning friend, who had spotted her boyfriend out and about, his arms draped over another woman. But there were no doubts. The pictures were definitely of him. Underneath it all, if she was being brutally honest with herself, she'd always secretly sensed he was a player. But she had told herself she was imagining things, for he had never, ever given her reason to doubt his integrity. But now, the evidence was plain to see. The way Dennis is looking at the young woman in the photograph is the way that Marilyn wished he'd look at her. Maybe he had looked at her like that once upon a time, many moons ago, but not any more. And yet his romantic withdrawal from her had been so subtle, so delicately slight. She barely noticed it at all. But things were not how they'd once been in the very beginning. But she thought that that was the normal progression of a relationship, when it drives past the honeymoon stage, becoming deeper and more meaningful. Who was she kidding? Had she been lying to herself all along, seeing what she didn't want to see, what was staring her in the face all along, like a blazing red traffic light? But she was like a blind driver, driving aimlessly, without really seeing where she was going. She and Dennis had been together for over 7 years, but he had never wanted to get married, feigning all kinds of excuses about how now wasn't the right time for him. Maybe next year, he would say. And now she knew why. It would seem that Dennis had a commitment aversion, and while she had waited on tender hooks for him to pop the question, it had never ever happened. The man had absolutely no intention of settling down with her in the first place. She had put her blind faith in him. He thoroughly enjoyed being the kept man, and the perks of benefiting from her father's hefty allowance she received every month, complemented by her paycheck, that suited him most favourably, and he had not been remotely hesitant or bashful in spending her money on himself. She had been an absolute fool. She reflects back to her father's conversation, how she loved her father, for he was the one she could turn to when her world came crumbling and crashing down. He had always been her steadfast rock, the dependable soft place to lay down her head during the storms of life, of which there had not been too many. But it looked like the weather on the horizon was looking exceedingly grim and downcast, with no hope of a mere glimmer of sunshine. That looked like an unfeasible dream. Her father had taken her into his study to talk to her. "You know I love you, Marilyn, more than life itself," he had told her. "But I'm deeply troubled about this man of yours. You know I want you to be happy, more than anything in the world, sweetheart. If Dennis was serious about you, don't you think he would have asked you to marry him a long time ago? I wasted no time in proposing to your mother. When I saw what a diamond she was, I wasn't going to let her go. But this man of yours is taking his time. There's something about him that irks me greatly. I feel he's not responsible. I think he's only interested in pleasing himself and no one else. All this stuff about him and his friends becoming the next big boy band, he's incredulous. It's tough to make it in the music industry, you know. Many people are hankering after exactly the same dream. Has he not thought of getting a proper job? There's nothing wrong with having a passion, but the man should be able to provide for his family. But Dennis is not lifting a finger, is he, to contribute to your living costs? My guess is you're paying all the bills. Am I right, or am I right?"
"Oh, Dad, don't be so mean. Dennis has dreams, you know. You've always said it was good to dream, didn't you? Besides, he doesn't want to propose until he's made enough money."
"It's good to have dreams, sweetheart, but it's also good to have a paycheck. No one can live on fresh air, can they? That man should be doing something, even if it's flipping burgers at McDonald's. But doing nothing, beyond a dream that may or may not come into fruition, is like smoking hot air. It's like living in limbo. That man needs a reality check." She had dismissed her father's comments, but as usual, he was right on the money. Why did she always take what her father said with a pinch of salt? Her wizened old long-lived father, who was 70 years young, did not suffer fools gladly, and had taken an instant dislike to Dennis from the first moment that they'd actually met. Marilyn's parents had invited the young couple over to dinner. They'd both been excited to meet the new man in her life, but the disappointment her parents had felt had been quite unmistakable. It was like they were expecting to receive delivery of a grand sports car, and then they discovered they'd received a battered old Ford instead that belonged in the knacker's yard and was good for nothing except scrap metal. Well, that's the only way that Marilyn could describe the disenchanted expressions on their faces when she introduced Dennis to them. Even in his appearance, he looked like a boy band wannabe, with a cute baby face and wispy brown hair that stood up on his scalp like a shark fin in the ocean. And then there were those piercing brown eyes of his, framed by thick black lashes. The look that her father gave Dennis she would never forget in a hurry. It was as if he was looking through a glass pane and could see him as he really was, and he hadn't liked what he'd seen, nor had her mother for that matter. Throughout that meal, her mother had looked at her with sorrowful eyes, almost as if she was grieving her daughter's choice in men, like you would a deceased loved one that had passed on. At the time, she thought her parents were being dramatic, William Shakespeare kind of dramatic. Now she knows they weren't. She had failed to listen to their heedful pragmatism
and discriminating shrewdness over and over again, and yet they'd always been proved right. She still never learnt from her mistakes. She never listened. Her stubbornness and blatant obstinacy always meant she thought she knew better, but her denial and dismissal invariably always came back to bite her. "I don't like your parents," Dennis had barked after the family meal, when they returned home to her apartment. At the time he was driving her truck, as he couldn't afford one of his own. But a year later, due to his cunning manipulation and persuasiveness, she would dutifully buy him a truck for his own birthday. He continues begrudgingly, "The way they were looking at me, especially your father, I knew they didn't like me. When I told your father that I'm part of a band, I could see he was very disapproving. I mean, I've already done 6 gigs. He said to me, 'Yes, but what is your proper job?' I mean, how dare he judge me so contemptuously? He clearly thinks I should work on the stock exchange or in a bank or something. I'm not good enough for his precious little girl. That was the impression he gave me. I mean, this is my proper job, and I wish he would respect me for what I do as a profession." "Well, it's not really a profession, is it, Dennis? A profession is when you make money. You and your band have not made much money together. To be fair, I'm paying for everything, aren't I? Out of my wages. And, of course, my father's allowance. You're not contributing anything, are you?" "Lovely. So you're going to side with your father and his misguided opinions, are you? They've got old-fashioned principles, your parents, and to them playing a guitar and singing is not a job. But times have changed, have they not? It's not like it was when conventional jobs were all the rage, when your father was a boy. It's different now, and he's judging me unfairly." "No, but my dad is absolutely right. I mean, it's really hard to break into the music industry. You know how fickle it is. It might be a good idea to explore other options and enjoy your music on the side, and hope that somewhere down the line someone will actually recognise your talent and give you the helping hand you need." "Hope someone down the line might actually notice my talent. Listen to yourself, Marilyn. You know how it is in the music industry. You have to put yourself out there to be noticed. If I'm doing another job, how on earth am I going to be putting myself out there? You tell me that. How will I do that? I'll be hiding my light under a bushel, and then no one will ever notice me."
"If there is a light to hide," Marilyn had mumbled under her breath.
"What did you say, Marilyn? I didn't hear you."
Nothing, I was just musing, that's all." Marilyn had longed to tell Dennis what she really thought, but she didn't have the heart to hurt his feelings. She thought her boyfriend had an insipid, watery, rather bland voice, and she wasn't alone in this opinion either. Indeed, he had been told by countless professionals in the profession not to waste his time, as his voice just wouldn't crack it for record deals. But Dennis refused to be beaten by other people's negative commentary. I suppose it was incredible that he believed in himself so tenaciously, whereas Marilyn had always doubted herself. Maybe this was why she was so attracted to Dennis in the first place. A free spirit that could not be discouraged no matter how much you beat him down. A man with an ego bigger than New York. But sometimes that ego of his could be his greatest undoing. Needless to say, her father had told her that Dennis was an obsequious scrounger. At the time, she thought her father was overprotective and judgmental, who clearly thought no one was good enough for her. She had been so mad at her father for failing to understand what she and Dennis had together. But their relationship had been hot air all along. She had wasted 7 long years of her life on this complete loser, who had been taking full advantage of her. Did he even love her? She seriously doubted it. This was not the way you treated someone you love. She had only herself to blame for her ignorant naivety. As she ambles along the road, her whole body shakes like a jelly, not from fear nor anxiety, but from sheer indignation. In her mind's eye, she would love to go to Dennis's wardrobe and cut out the crotch area of all his pants. That's what some women did in the movies to extract their revenge. And the idea rather appealed to her. But that was almost too easy. She needed to get him where it really hurt, his ego. The plan she had in mind was so much better. That way he might feel what she's feeling right now. And that would be a good start.
She's now on the street in town she knows like the back of her hand. Her phone hugs the back pocket of her white jeans, the intrusive rectangular shape peering rudely through the fabric. It shudders and vibrates, and so she pulls it out of the pocket to read the message. "Might be running a few minutes late." She taps in a reply. "No worries. See you when I see you. I'm the one wearing the red scarf. Can't wait to finally meet you." Smiley face and heart. "Me too," comes the reply. She smiles as she replaces the phone into her purse, as leaving it in the back of her jeans is not a good idea. Finally, she clip-clops to the bar. Her manicured toenails peer through the sandals, a very beguiling pearly pink. She knows she looks good tonight, and her faith in her appearance is promptly rewarded by the appraisals of men in the bar, who give her an approving once-over. She doesn't really like drawing attention to herself, but today is all about drawing attention to herself. Indeed, she wants to be noticed as revenge, and making her boyfriend jealous is all part of the great plan. She can only hope someone who knows her will see her and report back to her boyfriend. That's exactly what she wants. People talk in this small town, and word gets around faster here than social media. And Marilyn is relying on the efficiency of gossiping tongues. She surreptitiously scans the people drinking around the bar, some sitting around tables, trying to not make it look too obvious. She's happy to see a few regulars there, some casting her furtive glances. This is very good news indeed. By the looks of things, her masterful plan will roll forward seamlessly. Now some of the locals will witness her with her date, and she'll make absolutely certain she's outrageously flirtatious. She can see Tom Tanner. He's sitting over there in the corner, pretending not to look, but he keeps glancing over in her direction as he drinks his beer, wiping the foam from his white moustache. His steely blue eyes don't miss a beat. Tom Tanner is a big talker in town. She can already see him saying to Dennis, "So you and your girl, Marilyn, no longer are an item, is that right? I saw her with another man in the bar, getting very cosy together. They looked like they'd been seeing each other for quite a long time." She'd love to be a fly on the wall when Dennis hears this discomposing news. She could see his face growing thunderously red as he learns that the sweet, faithful, devoted, loyal girlfriend of his is cheating on him behind his back. She knows that Dennis has an unbridled ego on him, and his girlfriend cheating on him so outrageously is going to go down like a ton of bricks. He'll be raving mad, likely to go ballistic, and she really hopes he hurts from the offence as much as he has hurt her. That's the best revenge. Play them at their own game. See how they like it then. Revenge is a dish best served cold, after all. The bar is relatively upmarket. She can hear the ebullient chatter of people's elevated voices. Men and women are gathered together around tables, drinking fancy cocktails. Ice tinkles in glasses. Laughter impregnates the air. She has come here on a Saturday evening with Dennis quite often, but arriving here alone without a partner has already invited curious attention and speculative questionable comment. She waves warmly at a few of the locals, who know her by name, who give her a convivial nod, watching her with an officious interest. It makes her feel safe to be in familiar territory. What could possibly go wrong with meeting a stranger here? The floor is carpeted with an opulent rich red carpet, and oakwood tables are surrounded by plush velvety upholstered chairs, while the bar is artfully displayed with all kinds of liqueurs and alcoholic beverages. The barman saunters over to her table, with a bright smile on his face, asking her if she'd like a drink. She opts for the cocktail of the day, a Caribbean cruiser, and it's promptly delivered to her table with an umbrella, a little tiny hat, and a glacé cherry. She sips the drink and swallows the cocktail cherry. It's delicious and punchy. She can taste pineapple and coconut and a touch of rum. It's surprisingly good. Very good, actually. She knows better than to drink too much tonight. She may want her boyfriend to think she's cheating on him, but that's the only impression she wants to create. She knows she's using this man she will meet shortly, just for a few drinks, that is. She doesn't want a relationship with a stranger, but on the dating site he looked to be the kind of man that would almost certainly provoke her boyfriend to jealousy, with quintessential ingredients that would easily work. Good-looking, bright, successful. That's enough. Of course she does know that dating sites are notoriously unreliable and can't easily be trusted. People posting up pictures of themselves done in flattering lighting over a decade ago. And then there were catfishers pretending to be something they actually weren't. But she got a sense that this man was whom he claimed to be. At least she hopes he is. She waits and waits and waits, but the stranger never appears. How annoying! Why is he taking so very long? She has already drunk a few cocktails, and her heart sinks like a boulder crashing reluctantly to the bottom of a lake. Lovely. She's been stood up. This is not what she had in mind. She could see Tom Tanner saying, "I saw your girl at the bar, sitting on her lonesome, drinking Caribbean cruisers. She looked very lonely." Now she's beginning to feel like a fool. The anger she was feeling has grown exponentially. Right now she wants to throw a hissy fit, like a little girl would. She feels enraged, and then she sees a brief light at the end of a long tunnel, as a relatively good-looking man walks up to the table with 2 Caribbean cocktails in his hands, and he hands one to her with a broad beam on his face. First impressions, he seems nice enough. "I couldn't help noticing you all on your own. The name is Morris."
I'm Marilyn, she says. Good to meet you. She decides clandestinely to herself. He'll do nicely for the purposes she has at hand. The perfect candidate to get her boyfriend jealous. All I must do is act like I've known him for ages, and flirt outrageously, and give the performance of my life. She glances in Tom Tanner's direction, and smiles inwardly to herself. His eyes are directly pinned on her. He's watching her every move. This is exactly what she was hoping for. "Oh, it's lovely to see you, Morris. It's very kind of you. I simply love these Caribbean cruises. So delicious," she says, taking a gulp of the cocktail from the glass, acting in a forward way that gives onlookers the distinct impression that she's known Morris for ages, and that takes the man somewhat aback himself.
"Do I know you?"
"Of course not," she says, running her hand across his arm in a flirtatious gesture, glancing up briefly at the bar to check that Tom Tanner is indeed watching. Good. His mouth is hanging open like a Venus flytrap. He's definitely gawking. Good. This is going exactly as she planned. Marilyn barely remembers much about Morris at all. After the cocktail he handed her, she feels weak at the knees, as if she can't support her own body weight. She remembers everything going fuzzy. What's going on? Why does she suddenly feel as if her head is spinning around and around? She can't even think clearly, nor can she string any sentences together. She feels as if she's going to pass out, as if her entire body is about to collapse.
"Oh, she's all right,"
she hears Morris saying.
"No, I think I'm going to take her back home. She's had one too many of those Caribbean cruises. But she's Dennis's girl, isn't she?"
She is sure she hears Tom Tanner's voice.
"What are you doing with her? I haven't seen you around here before." "That's right, I'm Dennis's brother." "Oh, I didn't know Dennis had a brother. You must forgive me. I had no idea. I thought you were hitting on this woman."
Marilyn's account in her own words. I knew after I drank that cocktail that Morris brought me that I'd been drugged. I was slurring my words. I was unable to speak coherently. My whole world became hazy, foggy, blurred. I remember tottering along, holding on to Morris for dear life, as if he was a telegraph pole giving me much-needed support. I knew I would keel over, fall down, collapse. I wanted to shout out for help. I really did. But I was in such a delirious, foggy haze, and anything that came out of my mouth was merely a mumble. It felt like I was stumbling around in the darkness, looking for the light, while on the deck of a rocky boat, under the penalty of gruesome, tumultuous weather conditions and heavy storms. I seem to have faded into oblivion, as I don't remember a thing after that, for I drift into the floating clouds of a fluffy unconsciousness and melt into a world where obscure memories are lost, and recollections bury themselves like crabs in the sand. I do not remember the car journey itself, for I was out for the count, lost in a world where dreams are ransomed, thoughts hijacked and stolen, judicious reasoning snatched away, like a wallet from a purse.
I do recollect suddenly waking up when I heard the car door slam behind itself. I sit up with a start, momentarily rudely aroused, startled from my dreamless sleep, to find myself strapped to a seat unwillingly in a stranger's car on the passenger side of an unfamiliar truck. We're at a gas station that is flooded with a bright light, but beyond the gas station, everything is dark. I glance out of the passenger side window and have no understanding or comprehension of where we are. There is nothing familiar about my environment at all. I can see the figure of Morris filling the truck with petrol, watching the gauge, blindly oblivious that I'm wide awake. Well, awake enough to fathom what this is all about. I've been abducted by this obnoxious man, against my own will. I very much doubt his real name is Morris. Suddenly, rather than looking like a handsome man, he has become an ugly predator, a dangerous foe. I have no recollection of agreeing to accompany him on this trip, but I do remember soon after drinking that cocktail feeling incredibly dizzy. He must have clandestinely slipped something into that Caribbean cocktail. I'm sure he's given me that date rape drug I've heard about before, for nefarious reasons. God only knows what his iniquitous intentions are towards me, but I know that they're not good. I feel so sluggish, so tired. I know I need to get out of his truck, or God only knows what will happen to me. But I'm fighting this losing, precarious battle with my own body that is seriously letting me down, not accommodating my need to move whatsoever. My legs feel like jelly beneath me. If I close my eyes, even for a moment, I know I will fall asleep. It was like I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open, like when you're trying to pull through from being anaesthetized after an operation. It can be exceedingly difficult to come through that delirious foggy haze and try to mobilize your body through that incapacitating state, as it's almost a fate that is impossible to accomplish. Don't go to sleep, my mind screams. Don't you dare go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. You cannot go to sleep. When Morris walks into the gas station to pay the attendant for the petrol, I can see him talking and laughing gregariously at the attendant, waving cash in his hands as he pays the man. I just quickly climb out of his car, minus my high-heeled cork sandals, as they would seriously slow me down. When I see the woodgrove on the opposite side of the road, I run eagerly towards it as fast as I can, but my run is like a dithering, frantic scramble to desperately find some cover. A large congregation of tall trees, obscured by the darkness, comes distinctly into view. They are a welcome sight for me, an opportunity to become one with the shadows, to melt in the darkness, to become invisible. My legs feel like they're weighed down by heavy, unobliging concrete blocks. As I trudge ever forward, every step an arduous, painful struggle. I cross the long grey ribbon of asphalt, which is surprisingly warm under my feet, using every last bit of available energy that is left within me to heave me into the woods. I'm virtually dragging myself. I'm sweating profusely. My breathing is heavy. I am like a car trying to thrive on that last tiny drop of precious petrol to get to my destination. I need to hide out in the woodgrove to sleep off my groggy state, and then get help in the morning. Morris could come looking for me. When he discovers I've abandoned his truck, he might guess I've run into the woodgrove on the opposite side of the road from the gas station. But it's so dark. I could be anywhere in these trees. The sprawling woods stretch out forever. He's unlikely to find me. I don't have my purse with me, which contains my cell phone, but I didn't see it in Morris's truck anyway. But even if it was right beside me, I probably wouldn't have noticed it. I'm far too disorientated, far too groggy, far too confused. I am now in the woodgrove. My delicate feet are getting furiously scratched from the sharp leaf litter and twigs under my feet. But I don't allow the piercing scratches or painful jabs to discourage me, as angry thorns pierce through my skin, showing me no mercy. But I don't cry out. My focus is entirely on finding some form of cover. I cannot see a bloody thing. It is so incredibly dark. Even my hand before my face has become invisible. Although the woodgrove is very scary, very intimidating, very bodeful and menacing at night, It's a whole lot more reassuring than being stuck in a truck with a stranger against my will. I had heard enough harrowing stories in my life of people in North America going missing. I didn't want to become another one of those stats that mysteriously vanishes off the radar, never to be seen or heard from again. I climb cautiously down onto my hands and knees, walking on all fours, feeling around, because it's a struggle, impossible to stand up on my 2 feet. I manage to find a fallen dead tree trunk in the woodgrove, surrounded by long grass. So I bury myself into the grass, close to this tree trunk, dropping down like a dead weight. It hadn't even occurred to me to worry about coyotes, bears, wolves, or mountain lions. And I'm glad I didn't allow those thoughts to entertain my mind, as Morris was the only monster that I was trying to escape. When I wake up, I find I'm being sprinkled with droplets of sunshine that filter across my face, nudging me wide awake. It's a pleasant feeling you get, rather like when you're sunbathing. I open my eyes slowly to discover that I'm looking at the leafy boughs of a tree dappled with viridescent foliage that cover me like a fragrant umbrella, while a soft sunshine twinkles between the branches and caresses my cheeks like a warm fan. I wake up with a sudden start, a jolt actually, when I come to the stunning, befuddling realization that my current whereabouts is more than a little odd, peculiar. Why am I not in my comfortable bed at home? This thought is very strange to me. I glance down at myself to see that I'm covered with a deer hide, and I find myself on a flat wooden solid platform, high up on a tree. The platform has been made of timber beams tied together with leather strips from animal skins. It's incredibly well built, sturdy, strong. The timber beams are covered with deer pelts. Where the hell am I? What am I doing on this platform in the high branches of a tree? And more to the point, how on earth did I get here? I then remember the ominous, horrifying events of the previous night. They come flooding back into my mind like a bad nightmare. I remember I must have been drugged and placed into Morris's truck. And when he stopped for petrol, that was when I'd managed to escape. It was a miracle I had been compos mentos for long enough to make the trip to the woodgrove. But now, what am I doing high up on a tree like this? None of this makes any rational sense to me, and there's no way I have the courage to come down this tree myself. I'm really high up, and I'm terrified of heights, and I'm so high in the branches, surrounded by hundreds of other trees all around me. When I stand up on the sturdy platform, I can see there are trees everywhere, and a blue sky above me that sparkles brightly through the foliage. All of a sudden I hear a rustle. Then I see leafy boughs being pulled away, as an agile figure looks through the branches at me. The face is so human, I'm almost taken aback. It's a feminine face with eyes so kind that the fear that I would normally feel from such an idiosyncratic encounter is eclipsed. No one could look at these eyes and feel any kind of fear. They are just filled with love. I realize at once that this creature is a female Bigfoot. There is no doubt in my mind about that. I'd even seen the Patterson footage taken all those years ago. But this creature is much more human-looking than the picture I remembered seeing. She's lean, slender, graceful, and incredibly Herculean in size, exceedingly well built. Her body ripped with muscular definition and tone. I notice she's covered in long, silky, flowing dark hair, the colour of a black bear. And I don't notice any offensive smells that are often reported about in encounters. In truth, she smells pleasantly earthy, rather woody actually. Unsurprisingly, like any professional athlete, her breasts are small and very pert. The creature looks at me and speaks to me in a strange language that I don't understand, but I know what she's saying. She's pointing to the forest. Amiki abo anada abosha. I found you in the forest. It wasn't safe for you lying there on the floor like that. I brought you up here. I knew you would be safe. Of course, I don't know word for word if that is what she was actually saying. But as odd as it may sound, I felt as if it was, as if in some way she was surreptitiously communicating through my mind, as I understood everything she appeared to be saying. The creature moves towards me. She possesses a matriarch type of energy, like a fussing grandmother. She puts her hand on my forehead, as if testing my temperature, and then indicates for me to follow her finger, which I do. And then up and down, to the side. She seems satisfied. She pats me on the shoulder and speaks again. I'm sure she's saying, "You're much better." Apaket abolobo anadobo aji. I indicate to the forest floor. I need to go, I explain to her. There's a gas station opposite the road there. The creature nods as if she understands. She throws me on her back, holding me with one hand, while she bounces down the tree with such superb dexterity. Before I have a chance to even protest, I'm now on the earthen floor of the forest. The Bigfoot guides me through the woods, watching over me all the time, as if worried I'm going to pass out. But she seems reassured that I'm fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for helping me. You have no idea what you've done for me. I'm so grateful.
I reach out to give her a hug. It was the most natural thing in the world for me to do. And I can see by her eyes, my actions have moved her to the quick. I feel so tiny in her arms. She looks so genuinely touched by my warmth. She pats me affectionately on the back, and in my bare feet that are now ripped and literally torn to shreds, I walk across the warm road. The female Bigfoot watches me until she sees me disappear into the gas station, and then she's gone, vanished from my sight, disappeared into the woods. She needed to be absolutely reassured that I was fine. Talk about showing me the ultimate form of compassion. How could I ever forget her incredible kindness towards me?
Can you help me? Can you help me?
I say to the woman in the gas station.
Last night this man, he put something in my drink. I think it was that date rape drug. I found myself in his truck. I think he had to put... I think he was trying to abduct me. I managed to wake up for a few minutes when we were at the gas station. I went and hid in the forest over there. Do you think I could phone my dad quickly? I want him to pick me up. Will you speak to him? Give him directions how to get here?
You poor thing. My dear, you must sit down, says the woman at the gas station, taking me into her arms and giving me a huge hug. I begin to sob in her chest, so relieved to be safe. Now there, she says, would you like some hot chocolate or coffee? Even a latte? What do you fancy? A chocolate, I say. A hot chocolate would be lovely. The woman smiles at me. I knew it. When a woman has a shock of any kind, it's not coffee that she gravitates to. It's always chocolate. It never fails to lift the spirit. When my father arrived at the gas station a couple of hours later, he was very unsettled. I told him the entire story from start to finish, and how I'd tried to make Dennis jealous, and a perfect stranger had drugged me with the date rape drug and thrown me into his truck, and how an ambiguous idiosyncratic Bigfoot had taken me up to the top of a tree to sleep off my sluggishness and to keep me safe from predators, and possibly even Morris himself if he'd been sniffing around while I was lost in my oblivion.
"Bloody bastard," said my father. "We'll go to the police later and report this dreadful incident, as this man, whoever he is, I imagine has done this before. It's a miracle you woke up while you were in his truck. Sometimes those drugs will knock you out, and you'll never remember even a fleeting thing."
Dad, I don't know how I did it. I was so sleepy.
"You did it, sweetheart, because when push comes to shove, you're made of tough stuff. But let's go back to your apartment right now to get rid of that loser boyfriend of yours once and for all. I always knew he was no good, but I had to sit back and wait for you to find this out for yourself. But you know what, sweetheart? I get you're hurting, and I get you wanted revenge. But I think sometimes the easiest thing is to just tell them to go. Playing games can lead to all kinds of problems."
I just wanted him to hurt, Dad. I wanted him to feel what it felt like to be cheated on. I wanted him to hurt like he'd hurt me.
"I can understand that, sweetheart. Really I can. But as for that female Bigfoot rescuing you, What an incredible story. Now that really is something for the books. Wow, those creatures are clearly intelligent.
Then you believe me?
Of course I believe you. You know, I always knew Bigfoots were real. And there is so much more to this world than we can possibly imagine. What a marvellous creature to show you so much compassion.
When we get to my apartment, my boyfriend is lying fast asleep on the couch, with his guitar on one of the upholstered chairs, and a plethora of beer cans scattered around him. I notice he hadn't even made it to bed that night.
Wake up,
Dennis, says my father, poking him in the shoulder. Dennis opens his eyes. He sits up with a jerk, quickly straightening himself up, stroking his hair backwards.
Sir, what are you doing here?
He says, his eyes glancing from me to my father.
I could ask you the same thing, Dennis. What are you doing in my daughter's apartment? I live here, sir. Me and your daughter, we are... What are you, Dennis? Give me a break. You and my daughter are in no partnership together. You've been cheating on her. You think you're in a partnership when you cheat. You're a tow rag, Dennis, a complete, total and utter loser. And my daughter wants nothing more to do with you.
My dad's right. I never ever want to see you again, Dennis, as long as I live. You disgust me. Now get the hell out of my apartment. Dennis opens and closes his mouth like a goldfish, but no words come out. I can see his face is flushing bright pink. He looks cornered like a frightened animal.
Hurry up, Dennis. We can't wait here all day. We've got things we need to do. You need to go. But where will I go, sir? I've got no money. Nowhere to stay. You should have thought about that before you cheated on my daughter, shouldn't you, Dennis?
At least Dennis knows better than to protest his innocence and argue with my father. We watch as he gathers all his things, packing them in his truck, the one I bought him. Oddly enough, I do get my revenge. He looks so pathetic with his tail tucked between his legs. And then he drives away. I hasten to say I never ever saw him again. Last I heard, he's scrounging on some other woman, and his musical career appears to remain in mute. To cut a long story short, the police were looking for the man who had abducted me. A string of women reported waking up in his bed, with no recollection of what had actually happened to them. He had claimed they had come willingly to his bed, but they couldn't remember a thing about it. I'm very glad he was arrested, thanks to the camera footage at the gas station, which enabled him to be easily identified. It seemed he'd put up a fake profile on that dating site on my cell phone, as part of his insidious plan. So I'd been texting him all along. I was very fortunate to wake up for a brief second from that drug, something which rarely happens according to the police. So I was exceedingly lucky. As for the Bigfoot I met, she lives on in my heart, for she helped me in my rock-bottom moment, and for that I am truly grateful. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.